Carbon and I have gone from a 5-year monogamous relationship to polyamorous.
I'm quick to develop feelings. She's really good at sex.
Babe, I'm wet. If someone was like, wow, like I really want to like go on dates with you right now and like fall in love, I'd be like, I actually can't. Everybody wants to date.
Everybody wants to date.
Taking away the stigma around non-monogamy and taking away the stigma around just like sex in general, this is freeing and liberating.
When polyamory is bad, it's really bad. And when it's good, it's really good. Obviously, the three of us continue to feel like the pros are outweighing the cons, hence why we're still here.
Ooh. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Queer Collective podcast. I'm your host, Carbon.
I'm Emily.
I'm Yaz.
And welcome to the show. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer. Backed by popular demand, we have our friend Yaz, who uses they, them pronouns, and you can find them online at Yaz the Human. To refresh your memories, Yaz is a polyamorous, non-binary, bisexual, Middle Eastern slut. And they are also a sex worker and sex educator. Yaz, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back.
So if you haven't listened to our first episode with Yaz, we highly recommend pausing this episode and starting there. It's titled Polyamory, Everything You Need to Know, But We're Too Afraid to Ask, featuring Yaz the Human.
That rasp.
Yeah, it's so like, sexy.
Good. I hope it. I hope it's good.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like in preparation for coming here today, I went ahead and listened to that episode again, which is painful in some ways, but it was also so lovely seeing like how things have changed for y'all and now knowing you for about a year now, seeing where my life was at. But I think the best thing was like I hardly knew y'all. Yeah. And now since then I've made out with both of you and we're now going to Mexico together in a month. So I think it's just like growth, you know?
It's growth.
Like, it's really cool.
The Yaz effect.
Oh my God.
Yaz effect. I really like that.
Since releasing that first episode 9 months ago now, Carbon and I have gone from a 5-year monogamous relationship to polyamorous and exploring the world of poly and kink. So we've been on a journey. I'd say it was like we've been open for like 7 months. Lots of ups and downs. It's been an exciting journey and there's lots to talk about. What you can expect from today's episode is we're going to go through the pros and cons of being in a polyamorous / open relationship. And we're going to chat about relationship structures, everything you need to know there. We're going to be talking about navigating dating as a polyamorous person, especially a newly poly person. And then lastly, we're going to talk about finding compersion and navigating jealousy.
So polyamory and open relationships, they do require a lot of communication, which is definitely something that we've been getting acquainted with. And they often bring up a lot of big feelings and a lot of insecurities as well that maybe you didn't even know existed. So we really want to chat about the pros and the cons of polyamory. So I really want to start off first with the cons, get that out of the way, and then jump into the pros. So what in your experience has been some major cons about polyamory?
Okay. Great question to start with. Let's just scare the people off of polyamory right away. So the first thing that comes to my mind is scheduling. We talked a little bit about this last time. Scheduling is really hard and it's not very sexy, but it's a crucial aspect to kind of like maintaining your relationships. But it's very tiring and tedious and annoying and I don't like it. And because I'm a little bit type A and a little bit anal, I find it hard to be relaxed during conversations around scheduling. I can get really like intense. Is that you too?
I like going with the flow.
I didn't even know that was me
Yeah.
until we started scheduling. All of a sudden, I have a lot of anxiety around it. And I'm like, I really need to know. And she's like, can I just let you know day of? And I'm like, no, that doesn't work for me at all. So I feel you there.
Yeah. So like I have other partners who are a little bit more relaxed as well, maybe don't have as intense of a schedule and have the space for more flexibility. And so it is like trying to find compromise for what we need and also what our partners need. And so sometimes it's like a little bit of both, but I find that to be a con for sure. Another con that's also a pro is the amount of communication and unpacking that you're doing can be really tiring, emotionally taxing, and it's also incredible. And we can talk more about that end of it afterwards, but I'd consider that to be a con. I'm also going to be referring to my notes today because I have taken this very seriously. So if you see me looking down, that's why. Another con is having to consider so many people's feelings. It's not just you and one other person hypothetically that you need to kind of keep in mind. There are like potentially so many people that you need to think about, which again, is just like a lot of brain space, a lot of like brain power into taking care of other people. When it's bad, it's really bad.
True.
And by this,
Yeah.
we have this one friend, Pat and I, his name is Steve, and he's very well acquainted, and he's been in the scene for a really long time. And he says, when polyamory is bad, it's really bad. And when it's good, it's really good. And so it's like, when one relationship starts to struggle, it can like really snowball and affect like a bunch of things. And it's like there are periods where everything is just super, super bad. And so that's a con for sure. Less free time, obviously, depending on how you're doing your scheduling, and then stigma. So something that I've been noticing more recently as we've been looking at potentially moving, you definitely face stigma because people don't understand what that means and have their own assumptions about what polyamory is, and like some real world examples of being not treated the same as monogamous people.
Yeah.
Is it easier to get a place if you say that you're roommates? Is it easier to get a place if they think that you're in a committed partnership? I don't know.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to play around with that, and we're in no rush. There's nothing happening right now, but this would also happen for folks who are having like a medical emergency, and only the person who's legally their spouse is allowed to come in.
Right.
And then, like all of those things that impact like the queer community as well as the polyam community for sure.
The biggest one I'm relating to right now is like when things are bad, they're bad, and when they're really good, they're good. It's like when you have those like really great moments, like great periods of time, you're like, okay, like it's worth it, and that's what keeps you
And then
going.
you're also
during
like, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's like your life becomes so exciting that it makes it okay during the hard parts. Like that's what keeps you going, I guess. And like, especially when you come from a monogamous relationship, it's like that thing in the back of your mind is always like, when it gets bad, you're like, should we just close it off? Like, should it just be over?
Right.
But it's like, that's kind of what keeps you going through it, I guess, and keeps you like unpacking all this shit, because it does make you unpack stuff 100%, because all of those feelings of like jealousy and I don't know, like all of these like weird emotions that you didn't expect to pop up, and you have to figure out where they're coming from.
Obviously, the three of us continue to feel like the pros are outweighing the cons, hence why we're still here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so interesting to like have it bring up and go through that and kind of go through the shit feeling and then realize what you need to work on, which is also a very beneficial thing. But it doesn't mean that it's an easy thing.
But then it can totally be a pro. So like you get to develop these communication skills, problem solving skills, learning how to vocalize your boundaries and express your desires. Like I feel like I can attribute so much of my self-knowledge to what I've learned through the process of polyamory. And so that's a huge pro to me as well. Other things that I think of are when it's really good, it's really good. There's adventure and variety, and you get to feel like NRE potentially again and again, new relationship energy. You get to feel the joys of like flirting. And even though all of us, we're maybe not great at flirting, but I feel also like there's been a lot of
better.
growth.
We're getting better.
I've gotten better.
Yeah, great. I also I feel like I've gotten better too.
Okay, good. I'm glad we're having this check-in.
Yeah, it's so good. Like milestones. It's a pro to be undoing toxic aspects of mononormativity and learning about your genuine desires. Those are the big ones that come to mind for me.
I think our biggest has been like that new relationship energy has actually helped bring that back into our relationship.
Yeah, totally.
Because like 5 years in, I'm sure you and Pat know as well. It's like things get monotonous and you start to kind of like take each other for granted, especially in a situation like ours where it's like we're working together, we're living together. You forget that person is like the special person that you love so much and you forget to take care of them and like do these nice things. So I started realizing when I'm going on dates with these other people and I'm like putting on lingerie and I'm like doing my makeup really nice and doing all these things, I pause for a second. I'm like, I haven't done this for Carbon in like a year. And that was a huge realization for me that I'm like, okay, I'm taking my partner for granted. Like this is the person that I love so much. She's my best friend and I'm not doing any of these things for her, but I'm doing it for a complete stranger off of an app. Yeah. So then both of us started really prioritizing each other more and like doing more of those special things. And then another thing too is like the scheduling piece. Yes, it's annoying, but also having to prioritize time for other people made us start prioritizing like intentional time with each other, if that makes sense. Instead of just being in each other's physical presence, we were like, okay, you're going on this date with your other partner. I want to go on a date. So it's like planning intentional dates, the two of us. It's made our relationship overall a lot stronger. If that makes
You
sense.
bring up a really good point. Something that somebody at my work brought up not too long ago when they were educating on the topic was default time versus intentional time. Or quality time. You two are living together. So you're seeing each other a lot. You're spending a lot of time together, default time, but maybe it doesn't actually have the quality of developing intimacy and strengthening your communication and like building your relationship in the same way that spending intentional time does. And it's really interesting sometimes that we can see what's happening outside of our relationship and then pull those tools and those things into strengthening that. So that's really cool.
I have one more pro.
Oh, go.
Okay, hit us with the pro.
Okay, as the last pro,
Yeah?
I think...
Last pro for you. I'm not done.
Oh. Okay, another pro for me is the sex part.
Oh, damn. That was mine.
Oh, beat you to it. It's also like similar to like NRE. Can we say like NSE?
Sure, let's coin a new term right here, right
Right
now,
now.
folks. You heard it here first.
Making
New
history.
sex energy.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe the person that you're with teaches you a new thing or introduces a new thing. And then you're like, I think I like that. And then you bring that back into your relationship as well.
Yeah.
And then that grows. And it's been really good in that department.
Not only have we been exploring polyamory, because polyamory and like kink, they're like siblings, but they're not the same. You know, it's like you can be poly and like not be a kinky person.
Totally.
But we've also at the same time have been exploring like the kink world and all of that. So it's like, I don't know if that's part of the polyamory pros. Is that cheating to add it in?
I mean, if it's how you're experiencing it, that these things are running like, you know, intertwined with each other, throw it in.
I feel like just exploring kink has been really exciting, honestly, and like going to play parties, doing all of these things. It's just been exciting, honestly, like taking away the stigma around non-monogamy and taking away the stigma around just like sex in general and just like being okay with like freaky, kinky stuff and like meeting other people that are like, there's no shame around anything. I'm like, this is freeing and liberating.
Yeah. As the pro of all pros.
Yeah.
So the next category that we want to dive into is relationship structures. Can you first define relationship structures for us before we dive into it?
Sure. So when we're talking about polyamory in general, we actually talked a lot about this in the last episode when I kind of broke down the umbrella of different terms. But long story short, a relationship structure is the way in which you are like labeling or setting the parameters around the ways that you are going to relate to one another and the ways in which your relationship is going to exist. So polyamory is a relationship structure. Relationship anarchy is a relationship structure. But you can get more specific. Like I'm a polyamorous person in a triad, which I'm not, but that is a relationship structure.
So my first question for you is, what would you recommend a couple do when their desired relationship structure differs from each other and their partner's desires make each other uncomfortable?
I haven't really gone through it much myself, but I can talk about this from more of an educational or like observing kind of standpoint.
Sure.
So one of the first ones that comes to mind for me is when somebody is monogamous and somebody else is polyamorous, which last time when I was here, you were asking me if I would date a monogamous person. And I was like, no, like a monogamous person would never want to date me.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily true, actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes things just fall into each other.
Everybody wants to date
Everybody
me.
wants to date. Correct.
Yes, correct. So it's called monopoly when one person's monogamous and one person is polyamorous. But we can also look at it like if one person is more drawn towards like an open relationship structure and somebody else is more drawn to a polyamorous relationship structure and then all the different variations there. First and foremost, we cannot expect or ask people to change. So if we're speaking in particular towards a monopoly structure, sometimes there is this kind of like underlying expectation that the polyamorous person in that situation is just going through a phase or eventually they're going to see that the monogamous person is actually enough for them. And so, you know, maybe the monogamous person is like, I'll just wait. I'll just wait for them to get it out of their system.
Right.
And then eventually they'll come back to me, or I'm going to really work on myself until I'm enough. And then they don't need to go see anybody else.
Yeah.
That's probably not a great idea. And then on the vice versa as well, like the polyamorous person being like, I'm just going to hope that this monogamous person does enough work on themselves.
Right.
And that they eventually come around to polyamory. We can't expect people to change for us. And so if there's ever an element of needing to like coerce or really try and convince your partner to get on your side of what your ideal relationship structure is, like I just think that that's a recipe for disaster probably. And ultimately, it's okay if as a polyamorous person, you don't want to date somebody who's monogamous. If you're polyamorous and you don't want to date somebody who's open, and again, vice versa, like you are allowed to draw that boundary and have those preferences. But I hear y'all asking more like, okay, well, what if it's not that intense? What if there is a little bit more like willingness to try to explore? Like, how do you maybe figure that out?
How do you figure it out? How do you come to some sort of middle ground?
Totally.
Just to give the example of our relationship, it's like, I think this especially happens when you are coming from a monogamous relationship and you're both trying to figure it out at the same time. It's like, what feels good? What do you like? And it's like, for us, Carbon's the kind of person where she's so comfortable just jumping right in. And I'm like a very slow burner. Like I yap a lot. Like I will say it. I'm like, I'm going to do this, that,
Big
and that.
talk,
And
little
then
action.
it gets into it. And I'm like, I'm scared.
I'm scared.
I'm really
so
scared.
I'm like, I'm so nervous. Why are you going so quick?
Yeah, no, I'm the type of person that is scared initially, contemplates it for a really long time, and then when I make that decision that I'm ready,
It's
I'm
go
ready.
time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been doing the opposite effect to me where it's like I'm seeing her go so fast that I'm kind of like it's making me like close up a little bit. And then me closing up a little bit is having the effect on her where she's like kind of like when you try to cage a bird a bit, if that makes sense. And then she's feeling like she wants to be more free when I'm saying like I need to go a bit slower.
And when you're talking about, Carbon moving fast and you moving slow, is that in terms of like
Emotions.
sexual emotions?
Yeah.
Okay, like you're quick to develop feelings.
Yeah.
Right.
And she's having kind of, I guess, the opposite issue with me where it's like.
It's the opposite. Yeah. So I'm quick to develop feelings. She's really good at
I'm really good at
sex.
Oh, we have a sex guru.
No, but
just
she's
like I'm just like one night stands, like doing really kinky shit with people. I'm just like okay with it. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
and I'm slow to open up to that. So for me, my fear is she finds people that are incredible at sex, that, do her just how she likes or in a way that she didn't know that she liked. And now this is the new way. And I'm like trying to catch up. And I'm like, wait for me.
One thing I want to just bring up again, because it was the two of you who brought it up initially, was that you get to kind of do some like show and tell and pulling in things that you're experiencing outside of your relationship and applying it here. Like I'd think that, if Em's learning something that they really love in the bedroom, that like she's probably bringing that information back to you, and that like
I've been sharing.
Yeah, that you've been sharing, but I can really relate to you. I feel like you and I are maybe a little bit more similar in terms of like where our comforts lie. So not only do I not feel like sexually inclined towards people right away, I also don't like people right away. So like I'm actually like probably slow at both for the most part, but like I can really relate to you. So there are, I guess, two ways that we can look at this. There is the couple, let's say the two people who are coming to this at the same time as they're opening up their relationship, trying to figure out what relationship structure they want.
And you have more history with each other too. I think that's the difference.
You have more history. Yeah, totally. Or there are the people who are meeting each other already.
Yeah.
Kind of like where they're at, right?
Yeah.
And so when folks are making the decision to come into opening up a relationship together or whatever, there are a couple of factors that might be drawing you towards opening up a relationship, like physical distance, changes in physical needs or sexual appetites, changes in emotional availability, mental health reasons, disability, chronic illness. Like there are so many reasons why we might all of a sudden start to think, wow, like maybe I need someone else, something else. And it's not necessarily coming from a place of lack, like you're trying to fill a void within your existing relationship. Like that's also really something to get curious about. Like just because you're having, let's say, a sexual problem in your current relationship, having great sex with someone else means you're having great sex with someone else, but isn't solving the underlying issue of what's happening here, right? So just something to keep in mind. Things that I would get curious about when you are trying to decide what kind of relationship structure is going to work for the two of you, and you're starting to see like maybe there are some differences in terms of what we both want. I have some questions here. Like, is there anything happening within our existing relationship that is encouraging me to move towards this change? Is there something happening within the relationship that's impacting this desire?
Yeah, right.
And then is there anything happening externally? What is bringing up fear and seems like it could be challenging? So like, do you or they have any past experiences of abandonment or cheating or et cetera that could be triggered by this? And so this is interesting. So if I'm like, it's really easy for me to like develop feelings for someone, like I feel like I'm more polyamorous, I want to fall in love with people, and my partner's like, I can't get on board with that because I've been emotionally cheated on in the past, and this is really triggering to me. And just having that context and being able to openly share with one another sometimes, in some cases, can be all we need to be able to realize, okay, this isn't that. I'm not being cheated on right now. This is happening transparently. There's room for consent. Nothing's going to happen without my blessing. Like sometimes that can be all we need to be able to get on the same page with each other. And then also asking like, what feels exciting about this shift? And then are there any underlying expectations here? Like, is this relationship going to be hierarchical? Are we going to include veto power in our dynamic? And then talking about your boundaries and remembering that a boundary is different from a rule. Ultimately, I think it is possible for two people who are desiring different relationship structures to have a wonderful, healthy, communicative relationship. It just requires a lot of work up front. But how is that any different than any other relationship, really?
Yeah.
Right?
Just different work.
It's just different work. So a couple things I want to mention about this like open versus polyam dynamic, which is like maybe what the two of you are kind of alluding to about yourselves. This is definitely how Pat and I were functioning for the first few years of our relationship, but we never called it this. But like Pat, I do have permission to share this number, but for the first 2 or 3 years that Pat and I were dating, they did sleep with somewhere between 100 people.
Wow.
That's impressive.
100 to 150. So like
Good
a
for
lot
Pat.
of people. Good for Pat. And I probably had sex with like maybe 15. And so that's like a huge disparity. And I was going on more dates. I have been in multiple long-term relationships throughout my period of being with Pat. And so technically we could look at that and be like, okay, I was operating more polyamorously and Pat was operating more openly, but we didn't say it like that because that's just how it happened. But like looking back at it now, I'm like, oh, I could have totally seen how we could have had conversations ahead of time that actually laid that out. And something that I was reflecting on as I was kind of like thinking about how our earlier dynamic looked was like, because we both had such a clear understanding of what the driving force between that connection was, it was much easier to get behind it. I know that Pat has historically gotten a lot of like joy and connection and fulfillment from sexual experiences. Who am I to say that like I don't want them to have that? Where like new sexual experiences cause me a lot of anxiety. And I feel joy, fulfillment, and satisfaction when I get to build an emotional bond with someone.
I relate to that.
Right? So Pat and I effectively were both saying we're looking for the same thing. We're looking for this joy, this connection with human beings. We just have different ways of getting there. And our ways are different. But if we can both recognize that we're actually doing the same thing, but through different ways, you know what I mean?
I like that
Right.
explanation of it. I like the conclusion that you both came to there.
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway from this is scarcity mindset is a really tough place to be operating from. But if we can get closer to understanding why our partner is wanting what they're wanting, and it's not because we're lacking giving it to them, it's just merely because we are not capable of giving them everything, then it might be easier to put your ego to the side and self-soothe a little bit and allow our partners to fly.
I had a really cute story happen to me that like helped me with, I guess, this feeling of like compersion throughout these like challenging feelings too. But we were at this rave recently and I saw this older couple.
I love this story.
And they're probably, I feel like they're around their 60s maybe, but they were just like, you know, when someone has an incredible aura around them, like I was like, their vibe's incredible. He had her like up on his shoulders at one point. Like they were like really having a great time.
Wow.
And I went over to them and I was just like chatting them up. And then the guy was like looking at me and going like this, like,
The 70-year-old man.
Well, I told him that like we were like open and kinky.
Right,
And
so that was an invitation.
That was
probably for those of us who are listening. He split his 2 fingers open around his tongue and then licked it. I went up to her when he was doing that and I was like, he needs to behave, like just like flirty joking, you know? And she was like, I would never want him to behave. I just want him to have a happy life. And I was like, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
One piece is like, I love Carbon so much. Like, I want you to be happy. Like, I want you to feel like this sense of freedom. And like, I know that you want that for me as well. I think it's just getting over these feelings. It is, like you were saying, like a bit of a fear of abandonment. I know it doesn't have to be one or the other.
But of
in
course
polyamory,
it feels like that sometimes.
Sometimes it scares me. And like I hear other people's stories. Like I have another friend where it's like they are now in a monogamous relationship and they found each other when they were poly and dating other people. And it's like hearing people's stories like that and like having my own past like experiences of getting like broken up with and those kinds of things, it can make you a bit scared, especially like I love my life. Like I love our life together. Like everything we've built, I'm like, I love it so much and it scares me to lose it. That's my biggest block, honestly.
Regardless of what kind of relationship structure you're in, like we're all coming with a unique set of history, trauma, triggers, past terrible experiences. And it's like, how are we holding them ourselves? And then in what ways are we inviting other people to interact with those things? Just because you're polyamorous and have the potential desire to be able to connect with people in this way doesn't mean that you don't have any of this shit that you're dealing with like jealousy and insecurities. And
You did say that you also feel jealousy, which in our last episode, we didn't think you did at first. But you're like, of course, everybody feels jealousy. I also feel jealous. And it's more just like not wanting to be a jealous person.
Or not using that as an excuse.
Yeah.
Not just being like, oh, I'm a jealous person. I am not a jealous person. I am a person who experiences jealousy.
Exactly. And I'm willing to work through it.
Could you take us a little bit through the difference between a boundary and a rule?
I think the biggest thing here that I was wondering is like, how are you able to set a healthy boundary without making your partner feel like they're being controlled?
Inherently, a boundary doesn't aim to control. So a rule is a restriction that you place on somebody else. A boundary is a restriction that you place on yourself.
Okay.
Another way that I've heard people describe this is a rule is an expectation and a boundary is a request for consideration. You are not allowed to have this drink. Okay. Rule, because I don't want you to drink alcohol. Rule.
Okay.
Boundary is I will not be around you. I will remove myself when there's alcohol involved, right? So a boundary could be it would make, drink away, babe. Drink away.
You're like, the restriction made me feel like I needed it.
Wow, reverse psychology works well on me.
But so if we wanted to look at it from that other framework, a rule is you're not allowed to drink. And then a boundary could be a request for consideration in the sense of like, it makes me really uncomfortable to be around people when they're drinking because I'm on a sober journey. Would you consider waiting until I've left the party? Or would you consider limiting your alcohol consumption to 2 drinks tonight? And then when you come to an agreement, that's an agreement.
Gotcha.
So there are rules, boundaries, and agreements. I think if you're curious about like, this thing that I'm thinking of, is it a rule or a boundary? You ask yourself, am I imposing a limit on someone else? Am I making a request? Am I speaking about my own experience and my own feelings as a way to communicate my discomfort or, whatever it is that you're trying to communicate? Ideally, when you're coming to an agreement of what kind of relationship structure you're going to be in, something that a lot of polyamorous open people practice is a relationship contract, which is essentially a set of agreements that all parties involved in the relationship mutually agree to and sign off on as a kind of like set of parameters or expectations or whatever around how you want the relationship to function. So here's an example, let's say, of something that you would put in your relationship agreement regarding protection or safer sex practices. So if you were to make this sound like a rule, you would say, you cannot have unprotected sex with other people and are only fluid bonded with me. That statement rephrased as a boundary might sound like, I don't have unprotected sex with anyone besides you. And then the agreement, this is about to get real wordy and specific.
Okay.
We prioritize safer sex practices by using condoms with other partners. We can, however, explore having unprotected sex with clear communication around STIs and pregnancy. We agree to have unprotected sex only with a conversation before the act, and creating a fluid bond ought to involve communication and consent from all affected parties. So a lot there, but you can see that there's a lot more nuance there. And that it's essentially like we're only fluid bonded with each other, except maybe in this instance, and then maybe like this, and then maybe sometimes like this. Like it's not so black and white, although it could be. It could be we're only fluid bonded with each other, but like you just saw the effect of me telling you what to do.
I just wanted to do it right away.
Exactly. And so a lot of people I think react like that. I'm very much similar. Some people would, really just like want to do what somebody else is telling them to do. And I think that that's toxic. I'd really be careful about imposing rules on somebody else outside of like a BDSM, DS kind of dynamic where that's something that you're consenting to. I am consenting to somebody else controlling my behavior, and therefore I am going to agree to those things. And then also still I can say no to things because what the fuck?
Yeah, of course.
So you can explore a ton of different categories within your relationship agreement. We just talked about safer sex as one category, but the ones that feel important and come to mind for me would be communication, time spent, labels that you use, the structure of your relationship, and the boundaries of everyone involved within the contract.
Have you ever had any disputes when it comes to the scheduling piece, like time spent? How do you split your time between your partners and then also have everybody agree?
Okay, great question. I think this is a good time for me to mention that last time I was on the pod, I was telling you all that I was about to go on a second date with someone who I had just met at my birthday party, and I was like recently out of a breakup. So me and this person, V, we are now 11 months into our relationship.
Congratulations.
You obviously know them.
Yeah.
I'm so in love with them. It's been so nice. Just like such a dream. Oh, so good. I'm indulging in experiencing these two relationships with Pat and V. And something that y'all already started touching on was that V and I were experiencing a lot of NRE at the start of our relationship, new relationship energy. And it was my first time in my life feeling it.
Oh, really?
Really?
Like that level of it? What do you mean?
I've never felt that before in my whole life.
You've never felt like the giddy, like sparkly.
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
No, what about your other like new relationships? And nothing even similar?
No. Like, I'll explain. And this is not a diss to the other people that I've been with. I think it's more of a reflection of how closed I have been in the past. And I always try to approach my emotions like very logically. And so when I'd start to feel maybe like the startings of like that sparkly NRE feeling, I would shut it down because I don't want to be codependent. I don't want to move too fast. All of this is bad and dangerous, and I have to stifle these feelings to stay in control. With V, right away, as soon as I met them, I was like, I'm only going to allow myself to do this if I try things the opposite of how I usually do them, because it's time for me to try something new. I'd just gotten like a month and a half, 2 months out of a breakup. It was a challenging breakup for me for a lot of different reasons. I was like, I just want to try it different. And holy shit. Like I was just like holding over dear life. I was like, this is crazy. And Pat's obviously feeling the effects of that. You know, like I'm giddy and, you know, and I'm wanting to spend a lot of time with this person who's new. And Pat's over here like, slow the fuck down. Hello. Chill. And like, they're totally right. I don't want to be the kind of person ever who like gets in a relationship with someone and then like their friends never hear from them for like 2 months or whatever. And I had to be really careful that that wasn't happening with Pat. And so we had a lot of conversations to try and figure it out. And ultimately, I think we've only really gotten on the same page about it within the last couple weeks.
So it took like all 11 months.
It took a long time for us to figure it out. And now Pat and I are exploring couples therapy, which I'm super excited about. And one of the things that we're going to try and talk about is repairing what kind of damage I kind of brought to our relationship during that period. And so did we encounter conflict about time spent together? Yes. And not necessarily because in a non-hierarchical relationship or any relationship, you're expecting the relationships to be equal.
Yeah.
Because it's not really possible. Right?
Yeah.
Where like Pat wasn't asking me to say like, if you're going to see V 3 nights a week, you have to see me also 3 nights a week. And we have to do all the exact same amount of things. It's about building equity in your relationships. It's not giving everybody the same amount of things. It's giving people the things that they need.
Right.
I wasn't doing a great job at giving my other partner what they needed at the time. They were going through some other stuff that was really hard for them. Honestly, I dropped the ball a little bit. And I'm really thankful that they're willing to like do that work with me. But yeah, fucked up a little bit.
I mean, don't we all?
I know.
We had a period of time where we like both kind of just got a little too excited and both fucked up too. So
Right.
it happens.
And we're just starting, so
More fuck-ups to come.
Are you at a place now where time spent does feel okay? How did you come to an agreement on that?
I think that the main turning point for us was almost like we had like a reaffirming of vows almost in a less like formal way where we were like, do you still want to be with me?
Right.
Yes. Okay, let's do some shit now.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to therapy with me? Yes. Do you want to start going on really intentional dates with me again? Yes. And so a lot of that repair has been done doing all the things that you'd think that you would do to try and like build intimacy again and build trust again. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, because I think that something that a lot of people misinterpret is that love is a feeling. And just a feeling.
And not like an action?
Not an act. Exactly. So something that I learned is that love is an action. I was reading this, I don't even remember what the book is called, but I just remember the line. In the book, they were talking about like doing a speech in front of a group. And then somebody in the group was like, oh, like I fell out of love with my wife. How do I love her again? And the other person was like, love her again. And he's like, no, you don't get it. Like I just said.
No, I do get it. Yeah.
He's like, I just said, I don't love her. How do I love her again? He's like, love her again. Love is an action.
Yeah.
Love is not just a feeling. Doing those actions will deliver the feeling. I think that that is a really important thing to keep in mind.
Totally. And if there is an aversion towards putting in those actions, then there's something to investigate there. Is there leftover resentments about something? Is there, something that hasn't been repaired yet that's standing as an obstacle in the way of taking the actions of loving someone again? Because like if I'm saying, I don't love my wife anymore, and you're saying love her, and I'm like, I want to throw up. I don't want to love her anymore, then okay, then you're over it. But I was not over it, and Pat was not over it. So we're like, okay, we gotta do this now.
In the same way that like flowers grow while you water them, I think like love also like flourishes where you put the energy in.
Totally.
But hold that thought, because this podcast is proudly sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer, a flavor for every vibe.
For our longtime supporters, y'all know that Vizzy has been supporting us and so many other organizations in the queer community for a very long time. So if you are interested in drinking a hard seltzer, we highly recommend supporting Vizzy. Our personal favorites that we're drinking in this episode are the Vizzy Mimosas, which we really, really love, and we highly recommend checking out.
And now, back to the episode.
I think kind of going off of the relationship contract piece, I kind of wanted to chat a bit about hierarchical polyamory, because in our last episode, you kind of like unequivocally said that hierarchical polyamory is bad, unethical. And people in the comments didn't love that. Like some people didn't like it. And one thing I have noticed just from like going to the field socials, like dating on the apps, like doing that kind of thing, I'm like, there's a lot of people who are hierarchical. And a lot of people are saying it's like there's some things that like organically in your life, like running a business together, living together, having kids together, being married, those kinds of things that like kind of just like make you hierarchical in some ways. I don't know. I think in some cases when you're hierarchical, sometimes you do have rules over boundaries as well. And it's like, what do we think? What do we do here? Let's discuss. Is it really bad? Do you still stand by that?
So upon re-listening to the episode, I can totally understand if people felt a type of way about that, because I definitely was passing some judgment for sure. I think that I could have done a much better job in extending like compassion and grace and more understanding towards people who choose to engage in that type of relationship dynamic. No.
This is like your apology.
This
like
is my
your
apology.
YouTube apology.
Yeah.
Like,
Should I have a ukulele? I passed the judgment and I didn't mean to. Yeah, so that's my bad. There are elements to it that I'm really excited to like share more about.
Okay.
And also I do want to state that like this is a hot topic in the polyam community, and some people have really, really strong opinions on this. And before I dive into anything, I will say that just because something doesn't work for me doesn't mean, obviously, that it is inherently bad for everyone.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not saying that it can never be ethical. I'm saying that it can be unethical in the same way that any other relationship structure can be unethical, right? So we've been raised in a hierarchical society, right? From when we were very, very young. One of the examples that I heard a polyam educator give recently was like, you were taught that you had a best friend, right?
Right.
You're categorizing things
Right.
right away.
Yeah.
So it totally makes sense that a lot of us feel most comfortable with this structure because we just have the most practice with it. My issue is not with the hierarchy in and of itself, but the absence of unpacking the hierarchy and not coming to the choice of hierarchy from a genuine, like, yes, this is what I want, and more just like taking it as default or being like, I want to engage in a hierarchical relationship because it's going to provide me the most security because I'm going to use it as a way to control somebody. That feels still sticky to me. But that doesn't mean that all hierarchical relationships are functioning in that way, right? So asking yourself, am I doing this because I want it, or am I just doing it because I want to protect myself from getting hurt? I think is a really valuable question to be asking yourself. An element that can sometimes exist within hierarchical structures is a concept called veto power, which essentially gives one partner the ability to affect the relationship that they are not in. So the three of us are in a relationship. You two are primary partners. I'm the secondary to you, Emily. And
Thanks for choosing me.
Oh, no worries. You and I have been
Carmen's gonna
seeing
be
each
upset
other.
about that later.
We can talk about it later. You and I start seeing each other for months. We really like each other. Carbon's into it. Carbon's down. You know, they're like, okay, Yaz is cool. We kind of look alike though. It's a little weird.
You have a type.
You have a type. Something's going on here. And then all of a sudden, Carbon decides, no, Yaz is a no. And you have veto power and you get to end my relationship. You don't get to ask any questions about it. I don't get to ask any questions about it. I'm out.
Sorry, you look too much like me. I just,
It's getting weird.
insecurity, I'm seeing myself all the time.
And like that seems like a you problem, babe. Like, you know, and so veto power, I don't know if there is an ethical way to engage with that practice. I think that is inherently a problem because you are controlling somebody else's stuff, right? But again, this doesn't exist in every relationship. So there's also the possibility to have a hierarchical relationship where there is more than one person functioning as the primary, right? So it's not just like you have one person who's in the primary position, one person who's secondary, one person who's tertiary and beyond. There are some people who have multiple primary partners, like so on and so forth. But I want to go back to something that you said in terms of things that can exist in a relationship that maybe automatically serve as putting somebody in a hierarchical position, like having children or being in a home together and all that stuff. So totally, you're right. Unless there is something that's happening to even that playing field where it's not functioning in that way. For example, Pat and I live together, we're nesting partners. Is it fair for me to say, oh, I'm practicing relationship anarchy, and then somebody comes in and is witnessing my relationship and being like, yeah, but there is an inherent imbalance there because you guys live together. You're spending a lot of default time together. Maybe your finances are enmeshed. Maybe there are other elements. And if you're not acknowledging those things or doing something to even out that playing field or really speak to it in a way that like dismantles that hierarchy, then for sure, then you're just saying that you're doing one thing, but the actions aren't actually matching up with the way that the structure has been laid out. If it's cool, I want to talk a little bit about relationship anarchy and then come back to hierarchy. So we talked about relationship anarchy last time. It's not just that everything goes and that it's just chaos and that there are no rules. Anarchy is like, who is the person who is imposing the rules onto us? And can we, the people who are actually affected by these rules, break them down and then rebuild ones that function for us because we're the ones operating underneath them. Relationship anarchy accepts that there are no existing assumptions or norms about relationships as a given, and instead asks you to reassess where, why, and if we want them in our relationships collectively. Relationship anarchy gets you to question whether your expectations are needs, if they're values, and what boundaries and insecurities are maybe coming in as default. You're questioning whether or not the person who you've been with the longest actually the most important to you. You're getting to question all these things, which again can exist in all of your relationships as well. In relationship anarchy, you're being asked to look at how to make your relationships equitable as opposed to equal, like we were talking about.
Right.
And two tools that I want to mention, if there are folks out there who are interested in learning more about this, is the Relationship Anarchy Manifesto, which we talked a little bit about last time, which is essentially a list of tenets or philosophies that make up the relationship anarchy structure, as well as the relationship anarchy smorgasbord, which is like a list of different categories like caregiving and physical connection. And it's just like all these headings with all these different examples underneath that you can use to kind of like tailor make a relationship, which is important in a relationship anarchy situation because there are no givens, right? You have to build your things, but there's no reason why you can't use those things in a monogamous relationship as well and just get more on the same page about what you're looking for together. And so in a hierarchical situation, there are certain norms around what constitutes a primary, secondary, and tertiary partner, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's on the same page about it. Just because there are assumptions about how each of those relationships are going to function and what kinds of things you can expect in one position versus another, what things are off limits in one position versus another, doesn't mean that that's necessarily how the relationship is functioning, but you're going to assume so in the absence of those things being very explicitly laid out, right? And hierarchy is not inherently bad, but denying its existence is. You guys are saying to me, we are in a hierarchical situation, but I don't know like what that actually means.
Like you as the person dating us don't know what that means?
Okay. What does that mean?
Yeah.
I can't actually give informed consent and participate in that because maybe you're like, that means I'm not allowed to wear green because that's some kind of, only you two are allowed to wear green with each other. This is a ridiculous example. I could come up with one that's maybe more applicable, but like I can't agree to that. Yeah. Right?
You mentioned that, you know, if it's hierarchical, for example, you don't know what it means to be primary versus secondary versus tertiary. And I feel like that I would assume can differ from relationship to relationship, right? And so then how do you find a hierarchical structure that does work for everybody if there's so many different iterations of it and everybody comes in with their own assumptions?
I think you just have to talk about it. And like having something like the relationship anarchy smorgasbord lays it out in different categories in a way that's easier than just like, so what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
I'm like, Oh my God, I don't know. Like maybe another strategy could be myself as the person who's starting a relationship with you. You're telling me you're going to be the secondary. Maybe I might do an exercise with myself and write down what do I think that means?
Yeah.
What are the assumptions that I'm making that means that I have access to and means that I don't have access to? And then maybe you can confirm or we can just we can do that to kind of run it by each other and figure out what is negotiable. Because there are some people who are going to be like, I only want to be somebody's secondary partner.
Yeah. I've met lots of people
for
who
sure.
said that. Yeah.
But I don't want that word maybe.
Yeah.
I don't want the assumptions, the stigma that comes with that word.
Yeah.
But if by that you just mean that we don't see each other as often and we're not being invited to one another's family outings, that's exactly what I want.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't necessarily want that terminology. That makes me uncomfortable. That's also aversion, right?
Yeah.
And in the year since 9 months since we spoke last, I've met lots of more people who are existing under hierarchical structures, where at the time I was like, don't really know a lot of people who are doing this.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot more divide in the community about people being like, absolutely not, no to this, and then people being a little bit more open to it.
I think for us, it's like the way that we keep it ethical, at least for our other partners that we're talking to, is like having as much communication with them as we're having with ourselves too. It's like we like sit down and talk about, okay, what do all these things mean? Each of us will keep a list. Okay, like what are all the aspects of our relationship? And then we compare them.
Great.
And we're like, are they the same? And then we talk about the things that we're like okay with other people. And then we go and talk to the other people about that and do the same thing with other people. So it's like, I don't know, everyone's like consenting, and like we wouldn't ever have agreed to like never veto someone else's relationship.
Right. I think something that kind of like learned recently in like my research is I used to have the assumption that a secondary or tertiary partner means that they have essentially less rights. Less rights to, for example, how often they want to see you, less rights to what kind of dates that you can go on, less rights to whatever. I think it's important to remember that like each individual is still a full ass person and they do have rights. They have rights to how they feel. They have rights to discuss how often they want to see you and then come to an agreement that everybody does feel comfortable with. But I think that where it might get toxic potentially is that if only the primary partners have the right to the agreement and then everybody else just kind of has to like
roll with it.
Take it. Yeah.
Totally. I think that you are right on with all of that. I don't think it's laughable that was an assumption that you were coming in with, because I think for a lot of people, that is the assumption that they're making. That's exactly what we're talking about, right? Is like we have to be explicit about what we really mean by that so that it doesn't fall into this like murky kind of like toxic territory. And that essentially, I think the best barometer to carry is, am I in charge of somebody else with this behavior? Do I have more power, and the way that I'm exercising it is by inhibiting what somebody else can do, then that's a problem, because then I'm not allowing the other person to be a whole ass human, like you said. Ideally, in an ethical, hierarchical situation, everyone is allowed and has space and is encouraged to have their own boundaries, to make their own requests, whatever, and that you don't have to run your stuff by other people to get permission. We're in a relationship. You guys are primary partners to each other. I'm the secondary. And maybe at the start of our relationship, we talked about not having sleepovers. And that was an element that was exclusive to your primary partnership, and you and I get to do all these other things. But I have a really, really, really big day the next day, and my best friend who I wanted to sleep over isn't able to come over, and I really need some support. Am I allowed to ask for that? And even if it's just like a temporary change, it doesn't have to be like a long-term change to the way that the relationship is functioning, that this is like always on the table now. Are you able to say like, no? You can say no and we can all talk about it, but I guess that's my question is like, can we all talk about it? Can there be flexibility in the differing of needs? And does everyone get to be a whole ass person and need things? Right?
Well, one thing I wanted to kind of, I guess, like circle back to a little bit was between the thing about like boundaries and rules, because I feel like inherently with a hierarchical relationship, like there's rules. You know what I mean? Like saying like we're not doing sleepovers, for example. I have heard like lots of other people say that. That's not something in our relationship. But saying like we only want to go on dates with other people X number of days a week. You know, it's like those kinds of things.
That's an
are
agreement
rules.
though, right? It's not a rule that one of you is placing on the other. I think so long as everyone is fully consenting to it and your agreements that you're coming to do not cause other people harm, then who am I to tell you? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that those are what my curiosities are about. And throughout this process of, you know, the last 9 months of learning more about hierarchy, I've had to do a lot of unpacking of the ways in which hierarchy exists in my relationship that I maybe wasn't super aware of or cognizant of. And one of my favorite polyam educators, Morgan, Chill Polyamory, she introduced me to a term called Seakyarchy.
Okay.
What is that?
I will tell you. So it is a term that was coined by Amy Garan that I, again, learned through Morgan. And it's essentially when the hierarchy is left unexamined or not explicitly laid out. And then it's the most sneaky. So it can come up a lot with folks who claim to be relationship anarchists, but are actually participating in a hierarchy. So one of the ways that I could say, okay, I can appreciate how I was participating in a sneakyarchy is I was like, I'm a relationship anarchist or I'm working towards that. But Pat and I are living together. And how am I communicating that to the other people that I'm dating? A sneakyarchy can come up when one partner's decision can impact your relationship, like what we were talking about before. Like, so you and I, okay, I'll change it up. Okay. You and I start dating.
Thank
Carmen's
God.
like, put me in, coach.
Finally.
Put me in.
I want to get some action here.
Okay. You and I start dating and I tell you that I'm a relationship anarchist and I have another partner. We're really getting along. We're going on cool dates. People think we look like cousins, but we know we're not, you know, and we're just loving life, loving on each other, having great sex. It's amazing, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Are you thinking about it?
Hey, don't get me worked up on the podcast.
And then we decide that we're going to have our first sleepover together.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, cool, but I actually have to run it by my partner. And you're like, why?
Like, this is the first time I'm hearing of it.
And I'm like, oh, we live together. And you're like, what?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's cool that you guys live together. That's cool. But what do you mean you have to run it by them?
Right.
Because all of a sudden you've told me that you're a relationship anarchist, but now we have to go and get permission from someone else. And then maybe I can clear it up for you. And I'm like, oh, no, we don't need to get permission. I just need to arrange it with Pat so that they can get out of the house. Like, it's not a problem at all.
Okay.
I want to be courteous of their scheduling because if it's on a day where they have work really early in the morning, we'll have to find a different day. But if it's like, oh, I got to run it by my partner because if they say no because they don't want me to, then that's a totally different thing, right? But essentially, I'm just saying, like, we have to be actively looking at the ways in which hierarchy might be just like sneaking in, which again, doesn't mean that you're a bad person because it's coming up, because it's the way that it's the society that we were raised in, right?
And I think in that setting too, it's like, it's actually just like being respectful of your roommate too. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't even know if that necessarily looks like hierarchy to me. It's like, sometimes it's just like being
But you brought it up earlier today when you were like, oh, if you have kids with someone, if you live with someone, those are automatically things that we think of as being more important. And like, they are important. Listen, I'm still kind of confused. Okay, like
It's confusing.
It's confusing. And like, I know I said this last time and maybe we can throw this in at the beginning. I'm not an expert. I am a nerd and I'm a slut. And at the intersection of that is this conversation, right? Please get information from multiple people. I am maybe wrong again, and you're going to have to bring me on next year. And I'm going to be like, oh my God, I fucked up.
Pull up a ukulele. We've gone through a lot of different scenarios that someone might experience as either like a secondary or another primary in kind of like, I don't know, navigating this hierarchical polycule. But do we have any advice for someone who's like entering this existing relationship?
Well, like V just did it.
Oh, yeah?
Right? Well, V's dating me now, and Pat and I have been together for 5 years. And you know, they're dating just me and not Pat, but they have like a really the three of us have a lovely relationship together. I'm almost inclined to be like, maybe you should have them on the podcast.
Call a friend.
Call a friend right now.
Should I call them?
That'd be funny. Yeah, do it.
Let's see if they're willing to share something. Should I FaceTime or call?
Whatever.
Hi, baby.
Oh my God, you're so cute.
Thank you. Would you perhaps be down for me to ask you a question that we can choose to include into this podcast and also, of course, not?
You can ask away.
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Okay, here. You want to hold it?
Okay.
You're the one asking the question.
Okay. What advice would you have for people like yourself, entering an existing relationship?
I think my advice would be to keep a very open mind. And I think approaching that relationship as if it's its own very separate entity is really helpful to keep in mind, which I think can also be jarring. But I feel like the best thing I did for myself in that situation was remember that that relationship was its own beautiful thing before me and would continue to be after me. And if I was lucky enough that my relationship could kind of coexist alongside that. So I didn't approach it with some type of competition or anxiety about what I would be effectively changing in that relationship, because it had nothing to do with me. So I think like keeping that in mind was really helpful. It still was really nerve-wracking. Like I really wanted to make a good impression. I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be comfortable. I also wanted to develop a relationship with my metamor, if that was like, if I was lucky enough to have that. And like, obviously I really am. That worked out really well. But I think, yeah, approaching it without my backup and without any intimidation or fear of that other person kind of getting in my way or me getting in their way. Like I really tried to set my competitiveness aside. I really tried to set my expectations of what that relationship looked like aside and just like view it and witness it and keep in mind that that's a gift. Like I get to be close to this other relationship, and that gift is not going to be granted to a lot of people, to be that close, to watch the love of my life love the other love of their life, you know. Like that's something really special. So yeah, I just keeping an open heart and keeping an open mind and understanding like, yeah, this might hurt. This could go awry, but it's better to come into it with your guard down and, you know, with your vulnerability out as much as you can, because I think it invites the other person to do the same.
What boundaries were helpful for you entering this relationship?
I think the biggest one would be that I kept like a close tab on my own agency and my own choice, and like continue to remind myself that if certain instances felt overwhelming, like if the three of us were going to go do something and it was new to me, or like even when I was going to meet Pat for the first time, I remember being really nervous and I kept telling myself like, okay, it could just be one drink. I could just have one drink and I can go home, and I can kind of keep checking in with myself, because I think for me, what I often tend to do when I'm around other people is people please and like make sure that everyone's having a good time, and I can be really social. And I think what was really helpful for me was reminding myself that every time I asked, like, how's everyone doing? Or what do we want to do next? That I was also asking myself those questions internally and like checking in with myself throughout the night and like being honest if those feelings change. I mean, the falling in love part obviously gives you some rosy colored glasses, but it really felt like I didn't feel scared. And when I checked in with myself about being anxious or nervous, I could find reasons that I didn't need to feel those things, or I could find reasons to say to myself that that was okay, that it was okay that I was anxious. And I really was lucky to be mirrored in those feelings. The best boundary for me was not letting the like good times take over, you know? Yeah. It was really about like holding on to my own needs throughout the process.
That's a good answer.
So articulate, baby.
Yep.
Love that.
Thanks for answering
so
our
good.
question. I feel like from all sides of polyamory, it's like, don't be afraid to have conversations. I think in dating in regular scenarios, I think people are so scared to have conversations like that because it's like, oh, that means we're serious. Oh, it means like we're like locking this down, like we're having this like intense kind of like, what are we to conversation. But I think with polyamorous people, it's been so different. It's like you literally like you're having that conversation on the dating app,
right? A
little bit, you know, like you're having these conversations on a first date. Like it's not weird, and it's a good thing to like bring up your feelings, bring up like everything that you're thinking. And I think that's something that should be encouraged. And if someone gets weird when you try to have a conversation with them like that, it's like, maybe you could reconsider that. So let's dive into navigating dating. I think a big piece, especially having gone from being a dater who had the objective of being in a monogamous relationship pre this to just being monogamous and not dating anybody, there's been so many trials and tribulations.
The trials have been trialing.
And tribulating.
They sure have.
A part of it too has been I haven't dated men in a long time as well. So that's been like a whole different journey too. Because
That's
even
the whole
before
thing.
us dating, I had just kind of sworn off of men. I was like, too much trauma, so triggered, so
Right,
no.
right.
And now I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I feel like I'm like going through the triggers as well. It's like that's part of it. So it's like, it's been. So let's keep it broad first.
Sure.
How do you navigate dating as a poly person?
Okay, so there are two different versions, I'd say, of me dating. There's like me open to like maybe meeting someone and developing something like, right? And then there's me dating like just having casual sex.
Yeah.
But most of the casual sex that I'm having isn't happening in like a dating capacity. It's happening in like a play party capacity.
Yeah.
So it feels like a totally different thing, right? Because I'm not, right? Like I'm definitely polysaturated in the sense of like these two partners that I have, like enough.
You're at the
Two's
limit.
a lot.
Two's
honestly.
a lot.
Yeah.
I love them so much. Like
Yeah.
if someone was like, wow, like I really want to like go on dates with you right now and like fall in love, I'd be like, I actually can't.
Yeah.
But like having, you know, casual sex with someone could maybe do.
Yeah.
But I'm not going on dates to do that. I'm just going to all the fucking sex parties we go to and just having sex with my friends, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Still waiting for more invites.
So how have I dated in the past is maybe more of a relevant question where I also talked about this last time where I'm just like really upfront right away.
Yeah.
And so my like hot tip is like just to be unabashedly yourself right off the get-go, to kind of like sift through what isn't and is going to work right away. And so that's typically been my strategy is just
go well for you because she's tried it. And
What
do you mean?
It's been here and there. Like just being very upfront with people about what you want, about what you don't want. Does that typically go well for you? Because I'm just saying from the stories that I've heard, sometimes you're really upfront and then shit gets weird.
That's true.
give us a story. I can't answer this
I don't
question
know if
without
I
a story.
can. Okay, I kind of feel like it's just really fun to be so straightforward
Oh my
with
God,
people
that's me.
in like a really
You
chaotic
watch
way.
them freak out. They are so uncomfortable.
Or they're like, they think you're really hot
Yeah.
and they just go with whatever you say.
Totally.
And then I'm like, am I a cult leader?
Right. Where did all this power come from?
I am so powerful.
Right. There's 30 people following me around all of a sudden. Right. I love when that happens to me.
I like accidentally sexted a bunch of people. And then the meetups were weird. On the app, it's so straightforward and very kinky. Like people are saying really dirty things in their bio.
Yeah.
So it makes you have dirty thoughts. Like you're like swiping.
Naturally.
Of
Naturally, I'm a slut. So I'm just like, that's fun. So then like I'll say something like flirty, kind of kinky about something in their bio. And then it just snowballs. Maybe a bit out of control. Maybe we're sexting for 4 days straight. And it was fun. Great.
Yeah.
But then we meet up and it's like expectations aren't meeting each other. You know what I'm saying? It's like, whoa, you really like said a lot of shit
Now you got nothing to say.
and you're not meeting expectations.
Right.
The performance review wasn't great. So I realized, here's the thing. I don't want to have expectations over people. This was a learning lesson. I've stopped sexing people before I know them. I'm like, honestly, it was fun though. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, that was like a fun learning lesson. But it's like, it isn't conducive to good relationship building when you have expectations for somebody right off the bat like that.
That's
a
fair to say.
stranger.
Yeah.
Even though it's things they put on themselves.
Right.
But I feel like that's different than like saying your expectations, like being upfront about yourself,
Yeah.
all of
Oh, I
those
see.
things.
Yeah.
This was me just being a slut.
Right. But you're like, well, here was M being super upfront. Right. And like, how'd it go? It went
Right.
to, you know, all of a sudden you're sexting and then it's like kind of disappointing because you built up expectations, but you're
Yeah.
also like, I didn't pull these expectations out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I was reading what was in your bio and I was just hoping that you were going to deliver and then you didn't. And that's a you fucking problem. Right.
And I'm a bitch.
Yeah, and I'm understanding the whole thing. So ultimately, how do I navigate dating as a poly person, as someone who is extremely upfront? It's gone great for me,
Okay.
right?
Mixed
It's
reviews
going
here.
good now.
Great.
Like now that I'm not going that far.
Right. See, I've also learned how to dial it back a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Here we
something
go.
that I've learned that I've unpacked in therapy is that a tactic that I have often used in the past is I want people to like me. And because I know that I have like a personality that's like sometimes an acquired taste, I'm definitely one of those people that people either really like me right away or they really don't.
I think me too.
Like some of us are just like this. Like
Yeah.
I get it. Instead of risking that someone might not like me, instead I'll opt for them to fear me. So
That's fun.
That's
so instead
Could
of
be-
my
could
first,
be hot.
yeah. So yes, sometimes it can be, but it's complicated. Like so, instead of coming into an interaction being like, I'm just gonna be myself, and let's just see if they like me. Instead, I'm gonna freak them the fuck out because
Yeah.
at least then they'll be scared of me. And if I scare them in the right way, then they'll be intimidated by me. And then I have the upper hand, which I am in recovery from. And I feel like I've made huge strides away from this kind of behavior. But so I've found myself softening a lot, disclosing the things about my identity and my preferences early on without trying to be like, are you going to be able to be as intense as me or not?
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's been a testament of like more self-confidence, like actual self-confidence. Like real.
And like your real
ooh,
self, not your performative self.
yeah, like actually feeling more comfortable with the person that I am and caring even like 5% less about people liking me.
Yeah.
So I guess that's how I would navigate dating now is just to try and be more myself, to have less expectations and try to have fun.
Yeah. If we're talking kind of on the poly side, because not everybody's polyamorous, where are you meeting people? What's your advice in terms of that?
Going out to people in person. So I think that the best way to do this is to start to frequent the same places. Commit to a couple of coffee shops in your area. Go to the same kinds of things, you know, develop some hobbies and meet people out in the wild and just start working on these skills that we've kind of been talking about, like learning how to flirt again, hold eye contact, you know, have like lovely conversations with people. And like, I really do think that that's the best. That's how I met V, my last partner at my birthday party. And that was just like serendipitous and like amazing and is like the best story ever.
Yeah.
And
Was V poly when you met them?
so they had a polyamorous adjacent experience, but this is their first time navigating it within this structure. And this is also my first time navigating it in this kind of structure. Pat's too.
I think for me, I've never been the kind of person who can meet someone in person. Like I've never had like a cute in-person meet cute.
Okay.
I would like to maybe try. I'm open to it. I think I'm just fucking awkward. Honestly, it's either I'm that intimidating cult leader character.
Right.
Or I'm awkward.
Right.
For me, what has worked has going on dating apps. Another problem that I've run into is dating people who are actually monogamous. And that was a problem. And this brings in kind of the part of needing to communicate with people like what you're looking for, which can be hard when you don't know exactly what you're looking for too. But they were like, oh, I'm looking for a monogamous partner. And you're kind of just like a side, like we're just like hanging out right now. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm like developing feelings for you. I was starting to realize that since they had never had any experiences with being poly or open, that they were kind of just seeing me as like a sexual conquest rather than a whole complete person.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, I'm down for the sex part. Like that's also why I'm here. But I also have like brains and feelings.
Yeah.
And great tits.
Totally.
Dating apps has kind of been the only place that's worked for me.
But though, would you, okay, when you say that you're upfront with people, do you also like disclose like the kinky bits? She was very upfront about everything, but including the kink bits.
I see.
The thing is, like, I don't want to hang out with someone who isn't kinky.
But see, that's
part of my goals.
What do you like?
But then for example, the dudes off of like another app, she just wants sex, and then do you want to just come over and then we can fuck, and then like but not get to know her as like a person,
right? Just because you're like, I'm capable of being upfront about my kinky desires, all of a sudden means that that's the only thing that you're interested in. So I'm very much of the mentality of like water off a duck's back. Like I don't think that was a good vibe anyway.
That's kind of what I'm thinking
so ultimately, I do think that the more that you learn about yourself within the realms of relationship structures, your sexuality, your gender identity, the smaller your pool gets.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're essentially trying to hopefully find someone who is maybe not necessarily at the same level of self-understanding, but is at least interested and aware of those things being elements of self-discovery. So this is exactly why my strategy has been to be so upfront right away, because I'm like, oh, let me just sift through the people who are really freaked out by what I'm saying or have no idea what I'm talking about because we shouldn't go on a date anyway. I'm just now being a little bit less intense about it so that I don't also scare off the people who are a good fit for me and are just like, what the fuck
They're
is
like,
all
that
of
was
that?
too much all at once.
Right? So that's what I'm trying to do. But yeah, like I'm sorry that you were made to feel like reduced to just like a sexual object. And also,
It's a learning lesson, though. I think you're just figuring things out as you go.
yeah.
What's your best advice for figuring out your dating goals and what you're looking for?
So I think that you can totally take a look at things that haven't worked for you in the past and kind of use that as a barometer. But if you are brand new to dating or brand new to polyamory or brand new to dating in a more queer way, or you're new in your identity as a trans person, like maybe you don't have a lot of prior experiences that you're basing things off of. So you can totally use examples of other people around you, whether those be your friends or even in the media, in books, like podcasts. Like, are there things that you can pick up on that other people are doing that intrigues you and excites you? And if you're able to build a container of safety to be able to go and just try things out, to do essentially what we're all talking about, like flirting with people in person, trying on different types of intimacy, physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, just going on dates, giving things a try, and then just using each of those things as an experiment, but consensually, right? So we don't want to like be experimenting on people without the intention of like considering their feelings and all that stuff. But I think it can totally be an effective strategy. And just allowing yourself time to go slow with it and know that you're going to make mistakes. And then there's also so many different like checklists and things that you can literally just Google. Again, like the relationship smorgasbord, you can use that to kind of guess some stuff. You can go through like polyamory like quizzes in the same way that there's like BDSM like quizzes and stuff to like, there's so many resources. Read in the same way that you figure out what kind of clothes you like. You see it and then you're like, I want to try it. Oh my God, it looks so great. Cool. That's my thing now.
How do you deal with a partner asking for more time and you don't feel like you can give it?
When this has happened for me in the past, I've had to figure out where is the lack of time coming from. Is it because I have a lot going on and I actually don't have time? Or is it because I don't want to hang out with that person? Because those are two very different things. Not having time and not wanting to make time. In the cases where I physically have not had the time, I've just been as transparent as possible about that being the case. I have a lot of work stuff going on. I'm really asking you for some grace and compassion and patience. And I can come back to you with more time and attention in 2 weeks' time. Right? Like being able to give some kind of a time frame for when whatever. When somebody's in the know, it's a lot easier to feel comfortable and more secure when you don't feel like, oh, maybe this is about me. But in the cases that it has been like, I don't want to spend time with you, that's really, really, really hard. It's hard because it's like I have sometimes like a bit of this experience with my emotions. And it extends to like how I feel towards other people. It's gotten a lot better through therapy, but there have been times in the past where I'm like, I don't even like you as much right now. And so I don't want to be around you as much. And I'm learning now to like not verbalize that every time, to be honest. And just like be like, hey, I'm going to be a little bit quieter for the next few days and not have to tell this person every time like I'm experiencing a cold. I'm experiencing some distance. It's usually because I have something else going on, right? But if it is really like something that's happening to us, maybe this is an opportunity for me now to bring it up and to have a challenging conversation. And if things don't get resolved, then you're just maybe not spending as much time together anymore. And you don't want to make time for this person anymore. And that's really shitty. Breaking up is hard. De-escalating is hard, but you got to do it.
Last section that we want to talk about is finding compersion and navigating jealousy. You dropped a lot of knowledge last time surrounding jealousy, and so many folks really commented saying how much it resonated with them. There's also a good distinction made in the comments between jealousy and envy. So we really wanted to expand on this conversation and move past the feeling of jealousy and discuss how to find compersion.
Compersion, for those who don't know, is our wholehearted participation in the happiness of others. It is sympathetic joy we feel for somebody else, even when their positive experience does not involve or benefit us directly. Thus, compersion can be thought of as the opposite of jealousy and possessiveness.
So a real life example of this could be Carbon and I start dating. You two have an existing relationship and
thank you for choosing
me. And you are feeling like genuine joy for Carbon getting to be with me and, you know, just like feeling happy for your partner being with somebody else.
What are some ways that you've been able to manage feelings of jealousy in your relationships and truly finding compersion?
I can't remember who said this originally, but I've definitely heard it a lot in the community that we want to hopefully move away from thinking about jealousy as something to be managed or dealt with and more something to like sit with and explore. Even just like that small little thing in the mindset helps us to move away from thinking that jealousy is like the enemy. Because the more we think that there is something within us that is innately bad, the more challenging I think it is to really like get curious about it, right? So first and foremost, there is nothing wrong with you for feeling jealous. It is a very human thing.
Yeah.
Next, jealousy is very rarely, if ever, by itself. Jealousy exists in accompaniment with other feelings like anger, sadness, loneliness, anxiety. Like jealousy, the way that I feel like my therapist would describe it is like jealousy is the first few notes of the song. But if you keep listening, there's actually something else that's going on here, right?
Yeah.
So first, it's normal. Second, it's probably not by itself. And third, can we allow ourselves enough time, space, and resources to get curious about what is underneath and also what triggered it?
Yeah.
So it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm feeling jealous right now, and therefore I need to put a rule on what somebody else is doing. Maybe I'll exercise my veto power or something in order to stop the thing that's making me jealous. And then I'm not really getting to do the juicy work of sitting with why it's coming up, right? So it's like, okay, can I notice what triggered it? And is the jealousy trying to tell me something? We talked a little bit about this last time, that sometimes it can point you in the direction of getting closer towards your desires. Like, I'm feeling really jealous of the fact that the two of y'all are going to movies all the time. And I'm realizing like, oh, I feel sad because like my father and I used to always go to the movies together and he's not around anymore. My dad is still very much alive. I just don't know where he is. But, you know, like maybe I'm like, oh, I'm jealous because I'm sad. And like, I'd really love if you took me to the movies sometime. You know, like it can tell us that. But more often than not, I feel like we're experiencing jealousy because we're seeing somebody like have a moment. A spark. We feel like somebody's better than us, that the sex is better over there and like all this stuff, right? And a really fascinating part of polyamory, at least for me, is the way that it encourages me to move away from trying to be the best. Right? Like, I don't need to be the best, and I know I want to be sometimes. I really do. But is it enough to just be like really good, right? At like what I'm doing, and that there doesn't have to be a hierarchy of necessarily of like me being the best person you've ever been with, the hottest person you've ever been with, whatever. And being super vulnerable and talking about when you're feeling jealous. This one sometimes is tricky. So I've had experiences in the past where I've like told a partner that I was feeling jealous of them, and I was like, ooh, I think that was actually an inside thought, because now they're feeling a lot of like self-blame. They think that they did something wrong, and they're like super people-pleasy maybe, and they're like, okay, I'm never going to do that again. And I'm like, ooh, no, this was actually, I needed to just like sit with it. And then other times like, yeah, maybe I am making a request and there is something to ask somebody else to consider. What are you asking to change here? Something within yourself, something within someone else? Is that an ethical ask to ask of someone else? Like lots of questions. Other things that have helped have been in trying to develop secure attachment, which is a lifelong journey for a lot of people. There is a lovely book called Polysecure by Jessica Stern that gets into attachment theory and puts it into the perspective of polyamory. But some questions that I was kind of thinking about myself, and I've also seen sprinkled from other educators, are the following questions. Do I matter to you? Do you care about my needs? Are you committed to supporting me? Can I count on you? And do I feel like you value me? So when I'm feeling jealous, maybe I'm going to like think about these questions and be like, okay, the jealousy is triggering my abandonment, but I'm hearing you say that I matter to you and that you value me. Does that information and that affirmation help to soothe my anxiety? And am I able to soothe my anxiety based on external validation and affirmation from someone else? And am I also able to rely on my own internal landscape and knowledge and experiences to be able to also soothe myself from time to time?
From that, how do you then foster compersion?
Compersion is this like beautiful, lovely thing that I've gotten to experience lots in my life. And with some partners and with other partners, I never felt it.
Oh, yeah.
So there are also some people who like have never felt compersion, period. And I don't think that makes you bad at non-monogamy. I think it's just challenging when we place this like sparkly ideal onto anything. Like once you experience compersion, that's when you reach like level 500 polyamory.
Yeah, like you're the best at it.
Yeah, like there's no the best at it, you know? Like, right? It's the same as like putting so much pressure on yourself to like have an orgasm, and that's gonna be what tells you that the sex was good.
Yeah, and that's also gonna be what makes it even harder harder to orgasm because you're thinking about it so hard.
Totally, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're like, oh my God, I have to be so happy for you right now for your curls, but they're so much nicer than mine. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like
Not mad at all.
Sensing a little bit of hostility.
whoa, yeah, like I am jealous.
Are you?
I am.
Can you feel compersion for me?
Maybe in a couple of moments when I sit through my own feelings about my own curls, like I might be able to get there. But yeah, like fostering it comes for me from feeling secure first. So once I have these questions answered, like if we're applying it to this, you and I are in a committed relationship and Carbon's the new person that you're seeing. Maybe I can only feel compersion for you once I know that you're not going to leave me for Carbon. I also can't guarantee you're never going to leave me. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's not a promise that we can make each other. But like if I've been feeling on edge because I have so much previous trauma from being cheated on consistently and my partner's like always leaving me for somebody else, maybe I'm not going to feel happy for you right away. I need some security and some confidence and some strength through my self-work, through us, whatever, to feel like confident that you're not about to ditch me for the next hot curly haired thing. And that like once I feel more secure, I can feel more compersion. For myself personally, I also find it easier to feel compersion when I have more information. For example, Pat goes on a date with someone, says that they had amazing sex. They say to me, hey, I just went on a date with someone, I had amazing sex. I'm like, great, good for you. Can I have some more details? Can you tell me everything, actually?
Yeah. Make it kind of slutty.
And if Pat has consent to tell me more about that sexual encounter, it's way more likely for me that I'm going to feel compersion because that's just how my brain works. I just
it's
want
like
to
more
know
context
more.
to the story. It's like you're getting a story time. And
Exactly.
you're like, wow, that's so fun and exciting.
Yeah, totally. So that's what helps me, but definitely like taking the expectation off of the table, de-pedestalizing it as like the ultimate ideal of being a good polyamorous person and getting curious about what could make that more possible for you.
Yeah.
Is it more information? Is it more security? What is it for you? Maybe things I haven't mentioned? Probably.
We're talking a lot about like affirming your other partners when they're feeling jealous or like asking for ways to be affirmed. Do you have examples of how we can ask for that? Like what could those things look like?
Totally. Okay, so for example, Pat is about to go on a first date with somebody else, and I'm really nervous about this person in particular. And I'd really love to know before the date that they love me. That could be one small thing, like they agree to that. We could also make other agreements, like, will you text me once during your date if your date's okay with that?
Yeah.
You're going to text me once and you're going to tell me something like, I can't wait to see you later. Like something that just like reminds me that you're still thinking about me, you haven't forgotten about me, whatever. And then you're obviously going to have to negotiate all of the nitty gritty of what those are going to be. Other ways that you could affirm each other could be like, I'm experiencing a lot of NRE in one of my relationships, and my pre-existing longer-term relationship is needing more affirmation in the form of, can we also put as much intention and planning into our dates as I'm seeing you do with somebody else, because that's going to affirm to me that you still care about me, that you still love me, you're still attracted to me, all these things. So they could be, depending on like your love language, if you want to look at it like that, it could be quality time. It could be gifts. It could be words of affirmation. It could be whatever it is that you need in order to feel loved, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Follow-up question to that.
a final
Final follow-up.
I'm just going to keep trapping you here because I don't want you to leave because I love you so much.
Okay, so if somebody is requesting these affirmations, say for example, quality time, words of affirmation, gifts, etc., has there ever been a time where even if you do those affirmations, they're questioning whether or not it's genuine because they asked for it?
I would like to believe that the people who I'm in relationship with are only doing things, whether or not I've requested it, only because they actually want to. And that if I asked you to please hold my hand for 5 minutes before you went on this date, and I'm questioning whether or not you actually wanted to do it, I know that you wouldn't have done it if you didn't want to do it. I also think that we can get curious about when we are expecting people to read our minds. Like,
Right.
why is it more sexy or like more important when someone's just like guessing what we want? Like, it's a tricky place to be. Like, sometimes you build enough of a rapport with someone that you know like what's going to make them feel good.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think that it makes it any less special necessarily if someone's asking you. If this is like a repetitive thing and your partner is never doing anything for for you out of their own desire to make you feel good, like I think that's kind of a separate situation.
Yeah.
If my partner, for example, was like, okay, you know what's going to make me feel secure? If you call me every hour on the hour while you're on your date.
Yeah.
You're making a request. Thank you so much for making that request.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I can call you one time.
Right.
Or I'm actually not going to call you at all.
Yeah.
Right.
We can have a 30-minute debrief when I get home.
Yeah.
We can go on a date tomorrow. Like, I don't have to just agree to whatever it is that somebody else is asking of me, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If something feels like not good and you can't genuinely give that,
Yeah.
maybe reconsider agreeing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I like it.
Because there should be trust in a relationship. And it's like, if you do love this person, then they shouldn't be doing things out of that.
You'd hope not.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again.
My pleasure.
Yes, and giving us all your wisdom and intel, all the follow-up questions. We really appreciate it.
If anyone listening has a question for Yaz, drop your questions in the comments.
That is everything that we have for you today. And if you want to dive deeper into the world of polyamory, please check out this video on the left. Please make sure to leave a like on this episode as well as subscribe. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, make sure to leave us a 5-star review because it really does help the podcast out. So that's everything that we have. And until next time, peace.
Peace.